welcome to the module of Cloud Application Development Services, and in this video we are going to learn about the cloud application development on hyperscalers. In this video, we are going to focus first on an overview of modern cloud app development. Then we would be talking about the application development checklist. Then we would be talking about some of the best practices for application and database modernization. And then we would be defining about how to expand the digital innovation. Modern application development is an approach that enables us that's to innovate rapidly by using the cloud native architectures with loosely coupled microservices. So as we can all define that all the modern applications that to be built up with the best in class tools using the favorite open source frameworks and languages, and also it includes a platform that can support a range of services with continuous collaboration and delivery. So while we have been working with that's to build with the innovative cloud applications, we have to drive the impact by building the cloud native apps, or we can modernize our existing .NET or Java applications with Microsoft Developer Cloud. And we can also get started with any of these languages or like the frameworks including .NET that's to build the modern scalable .NET apps on the cloud platform that can be designed for the .NET. We can migrate the on-premise .NET apps to Azure App Services. We can use Java that's to build and to deploy the Java apps in the cloud using the favorite tools and frameworks. We can even use Python that's to build the Python web apps to Azure, and we can use Node.js that's to host the Node.js apps on Azure, and we can deploy the first apps in just a few minutes. And similarly, we can embrace our customers' changing requirements with these applications that can provide the highly personalized experiences and can change dynamically to respond to the events in real time. So basically, as far as the benefits for modern app development, we can create and deploy the better applications faster with best-in-class tools. So the tools that we can utilize for development of modern applications, that includes like Visual Studio Code, where we can edit, debug or deploy to Azure with a lightweight yet powerful code editor that works with any languages and run on any OS. We can use GitHub that's to securely deliver the software to be faster and could automate the code to cloud workflows with developer best practices. We can use Visual Studio that's to efficiently develop the scalable secure application that's to be optimized for Azure with the integrated development environment. And altogether we should use like end-to-end app development platform which can focus into building the great experiences instead of managing your own infrastructure with a highly secure and future ready cloud solutions on Azure. So you can get the flexibility with a truly hybrid cloud platform which can simply that could help us to build the complex or distributed environments across on-prem, multiple clouds and edges with Azure hybrid cloud solution. You can bring Azure management to your entire IT estate to run the Azure services anywhere with Azure Arc. So as far as a hyperscaler, you can also compare or correlate the similar functionality with AWS or the Google Cloud platform itself. You can create even highly secure, resilient applications that can isolate the impact of faults, security incidents and upgrades using microservices, containers and serverless functions to build your applications on Azure. You can use that's to build the cloud native applications on Azure where you can choose from a range of execution environments, fully managed services and a comprehensive set of application development tools that can easily be deployed using containerized apps with Azure Kubernetes services. So all of those modern app development best practices could help you to accelerate time to market. It could help to increase the reliability and security. It could reduce the cost, and overall it can enable the remote application development. Now, if you also talk about some of the application development checklist, that what are the checklists that you should be considering about while you have been going to for the modern app development on Azure or modern app development best practices on Azure. So basically, as far as the modern application development or the develop application development checklist perspective, if you consider, so there are few of the checklists that you should consider it for. Like to start with, from typically from an application perspective, whenever you have been started to perform like basically the migration layer. So you should be also like check about the environmental checklist. So that checklist that can help you to understand like the port bindings, because Azure App Services could also help to support for the port 80, that is for HTTP, and port 443 for the HTTPS specific traffic. You should also consider about like the application checklist. Instead of like using the assemblies in the GAC, which is not yet supported, we should consider any third party DLL, or even for the any other assemblies that we can put it into in the local bin folders itself while going for the migration layer. And we should also talk about like integration in terms of the on-premise integration, that is as part of the core checklist process, that how it should be on the development side. We have to ensure that all the authorized team members can have the provision infrastructure and can deploy the applications itself, like the deploying the apps that should involve like the app services environment using an isolated app service plan, where we can enable the VNet integrations like the virtual network integrations in the Azure VNet. We can establish a site-to-site VPN between the Azure VNet and on-premises, and then we can enable the routes between the app services and the on-premise VMs, and while we have been establishing a hybrid connection. Similarly, we should be also being able to provide the developers with the production like environments. If the dev and test environments don't match the production environment, so it is going to be hard to test and to diagnose the problems. Therefore, we should be keeping the development and test environments as close to the production environment as possible, and we have to also make sure that the test data to be consistent with the data that's to be used in the production. So the recommendation doesn't imply that anyone can push the live updates to the production deployment, but it is all about like reducing the friction for the development and QA teams to create the production like environments. And we should also have a proper authentication channel. Like when you have been migrating your application to Azure, you also need to enable like authentication with Azure Active Directory. So that means that modifying some of your configurations to be able to authenticate to the users via Azure AD. And you have to also manage the proper session state, caching functionality, database integration. So while you have been making your application to be stateless in order to scale or switch at will, in this case if it is not possible, so please have the session state to be configured, that is to be persisted into Azure Redis cache. Now, what are the best practices for the application and the database modernization? Now, if we have to be defining about the application development and the modernization best practices, so we have to also just need to make sure that we have the proper understanding of the application that is to be there in places where we should have the proper development best practices to be defined in terms of the cloud migration and the modernization checklist perspective, that to understand how to we could be able to strategize, as well as we could be able to understand the important stakeholders as part of the modernization action plan. And we should prioritize the applications that which have to be actually modernized on this particular platform. We have to determine the modernization strategy, whether has to go for a simple lift and shift approach, or whether we have to go for a lift, tinker and shift, that is to go for not only just rehosting, but we have to go for the that's to go for the replatforming or rebuilding or refactoring of the applications itself, and where we can also overcome the user concerns and resentments as quickly as possible, and how we can at the end can embed the security at the each and every stages of the process. Like we should have to assess the assessments, cost estimators and the tools. We should be able to identify the workloads that needs the attention before migration, and we should be able to learn the benefits of modernizing the apps and the infrastructure. So altogether, it should be able to help us to expand the digital innovation best practices, because application modernization is just the consolidation. It's the repurposing or refactoring of the legacy programming or the software code to create the new business value from the existing application and align it more closely with your current business requirements. So you should be able to accelerate the transformation at any legacy system to extend its capabilities using automated proprietary modernization and migration, that is to you can help it for innovation perspective. You can enhance your platform ecosystems with the cloud native or digital technologies, and you should be able to perform like the application modernization as part of the wider program to the work that's called a smart digital transformation. That can happen when your software thus goes ahead and bridges the gap in between the processes that how that's a so-called legacy systems which can offer that the systems which has been running the business, and the new technology that can also help to enabling the innovation that is needed to succeed it in the digital marketplace. So with that, let's have also to check about a quick demonstration that how this modern application or migration and the modernization that could take place. So here I am that's going to show about a Kubernetes clusters that is to be available on Azure as one of the major hyperscalers, Microsoft Azure platform. And you can see over there that's as part of the Azure Kubernetes services or AKS services perspective, there are the independent namespaces that is to be available. Now namespaces that is to be defined as a logical containers that helps to identify the individual applications to be deployed into. And here I have a standardized customized namespace also to be deployed along with the 4 default namespaces, that's called a dev. And I have also a standard workload like a sample workload that's to be deployed into like a deployment YAML file that is already got to be deployed as part of the standard application deployment practices. And this application has been running, as you can see, over the pod IP that is 10.244.1.10. And also you can see over there that this application perspective, we have also like the services and the ingresses that is also have been configured with the kubedns and the matrices server. And we have also some of the basic configurations being available, so that includes like the config maps and secrets that's to work as a database connectivity and the certificate layer connectivity perspective. Now on the cluster configuration level, if you also were to check that the clusters, that the AKS clusters as per as the modern application development and migration checklist, it should have been configured like the authentication and authorizations, where we can choose between the local accounts or Azure AD based authentications and authorizations for or including like Azure RBAC or Kubernetes RBAC for the authorization level. So authentication and authorization that could happen into the 3 different layers, like it could include the local accounts with Kubernetes RBAC, that includes like the built-in Kubernetes role-based access control for authorization that could be checked over the cluster, or it should also include like Azure AD authentications with Kubernetes RBAC, where like Azure AD based authentications and Kubernetes native RBAC could be supported for authorization, and Azure AD authentication with Azure RBAC could be also supported, where we can use like Azure role assignments for authorization checks on the cluster. API server availability, which is like master services for AKS clusters, that includes the API server availability in the uptime service level, which could guarantee that the Kubernetes API server uptime for 99.9% of the clusters. And it should include like an optimization for the cost perspective, like 99.95 or 99.9% as per as the availability that is being concerned about. Now let's talk about that how to being connect to this cluster. So here I have already been able to connect to this cluster. So in order to connect to the clusters, we can move about the overview section where we should be able to connect to these AKS clusters itself. And while we have been connecting to AKS clusters, we have to make sure that we just execute the appropriate commands in order to just being able to connect to the clusters. And we should be also being able to get the credentials, that's the default credentials that we can pass through as part of our resource groups and the cluster that names that has to be deployed into. And here also you can see that while we have been able to connect to the clusters, that the available namespaces over this Kubernetes clusters, and also the deployments that we already have in terms of a specific namespace that is being concerned. So here that we have already a deployment.yaml file that's got to be deployed. And if you'd like to check about the deployment details for this file, so you can basically check about how the deployment files looks like. So here the deployment that is working, so it is using like the image of from Microsoft's own container registry, that's a sample Nginx image that is being working into over the container port numbers 80. And it's also defined that this Nginx app engine, that is Nginx web front engine, that is being working into over the containers. So it is just including the replication, that is includes like 3 replicas are already working as part of the deployment practices. And it also includes the resources, that is to have like a resource requirements for the CPU of 250 MBs and memories of 64 MBs requirements perspective. Now this particular resource has already got to be deployed into, and this is like also if you'd like to check about over the pod level configurations for this particular demonstration. So here is like you can see that this particular resource got deployed and it is already been working into this AKS cluster level. And if we also need to have like a sample deployment that you would like to check about, so we can also run a sample pod itself. So in order to run the sample pod, we can just execute the command like kubectl run followed by the pod name, and we can use a standard image itself, and that image would be basically running that we have been looking forward to. And we can also just being able to define about um, the policy for that image that we are looking forward to. And while we have been defining this particular image, we would also like to store that particular image details. So we have been just specifying the details over here, and we would also like to store that particular image details. And here if we just run this command once more, and we'd like to specify here the namespace. So let me also define the namespace, and now if we just check over this namespace that is being running into, so you can see here that's my another pod that I have just got deployed with the application that's to specified into. Academy is my another Kubernetes pod where I have also deployed an Nginx web server application, so that is currently being running into. Now if you would like to describe about this particular pod using like kubectl describe pod describe command, so you can also describe that particular pod itself. So what you can do here is that you can just define and followed by your namespace details. So here you can see that the details about that particular pod that has got to be deployed with the sample application. So here like you can see, as part of the modern development best practices, over this particular pod that is running and over the application that is getting to be pulled into on the agent pool services, and it is being working or running on this particular IPs and on the container ID details where this application actually being running into, and it is being mounting over this applications level. It is also including the volume supports, the config map details and the node selector details, and also it including like some of the default schedulers based services. It is pulling the images from the Nginx. It successfully pulled the images and then it started the containers and it has been running all over there. So in this particular video you have learned about that the modern application development services on the hyperscaler, specifically to consider over Azure, and how this modern application development checklist to be considered about while we have been going for the cloud migration and the cloud application deployment best practices to consider into. And also we have learned about that how we can just deploy the sample applications over Azure Kubernetes services on the containers through the pods. So I hope this video has been informative for you, and I look forward to see you in the next video. Thanks for your time.